In F1 23, there are 110 levels of AI difficulty, and in this video I'm going to try and beat every single one of these difficulties, all the way from 0% AI, who are absolutely dreadful, all the way up to 110% AI, which are the hardest level in the game. So of course I started with 0% AI, and to make the first few races just a little bit harder, I also made them a last to first challenge, mainly because I think it would be a little bit boring if not. We get a relatively decent start as we squeeze past Bottas, Albon and Tsunoda, and then Nico Hülkenberg moves under braking, but we do eventually get past him. I thought I'd cut these races down quite a lot as they're pretty boring, but by the end of the first lap we're already up to second place. And it didn't take us very long to get up to first place. As we're coming up to turn 3 here, we narrowly avoid Charles Leclerc braking early, and now the race is pretty much over. So yeah, the first race against 0% AI was not that difficult. As we come across the line here, I try and do some donuts, but I simply lack the talent. But the gap to second place was 31.36 seconds. However, you're going to see how fast this gap is reduced as we increase the difficulty. Next up was 10% AI. This time we're starting in the Williams and we do actually get a pretty shocking start, but it doesn't really matter. As we go around the outside of George Russell here into turn 1, I kind of get stuck on the curb. But thankfully I came away from turn 1 without any damage. I do, of course, end up winning the race, this time by 27.7 seconds, which is 5 seconds less than 0% AI with a 10% increase in difficulty. So at this point everything was going pretty well. I chose Stroll for the race against 20% AI as I thought he'd be somewhere near the back. But for some reason the F1 game decided to put Alonso in first and Stroll in second, so I had to drop out the whole way so I could keep my results for the gap to second pretty accurate. Fortunately, going to the back didn't actually make much of a difference as we still won the race. However, the gap was significantly reduced down to 13.34 seconds, which is significantly lower than 10% AI. But realistically, none of this actually really mattered. As long as we were winning the races and the challenge was slowly being completed, I was making progress. As we beat 30% AI, we crossed the line to finish 15.65 seconds ahead of them, and I actually gained a bit of time back on second place compared to 20% AI, mainly because I actually made overtakes into turn 1 this time. I'm going to skip through these middle difficulties because they're not actually that entertaining. However, for 40% AI, Lewis Hamilton was the first driver to get within 10 seconds of my race time. He brought the gap down to 9.4 seconds, and I was slowly starting to notice that the AI were closing in on my lap time quite considerably. As I've mentioned before, I'm not that good at the F1 games and I usually play around 80% AI. And I probably spin out a little bit too much considering that I'm using medium traction control. And for this challenge, I knew that if I was going to beat 110% AI, I'd have to be using no traction control. And it was at this point where I realised that the challenge might not actually be possible. But I kept on going because I'm trying to commit to making one YouTube video a week and I didn't have enough time to record a different challenge. As we come across the line against 50% AI, second place once again closes the gap down to 8.6 seconds. So after a 50% increase in difficulty, the AI have gone from 31 seconds behind me all the way down to only 8.5 seconds. Now on to 70% AI, and I chose to be Gasly for this race, so I started a little bit further back. This did mean that I eventually only won the race by 3 seconds, however I feel like if I started at the front I definitely would have won by a little bit more. So my plan for day 2 was to win all the races from 70% AI all the way up to 100% AI. I want to leave day 3 just for 110% AI as I realised how difficult that would be. Initially I got a pretty good start. I jumped Sergio Perez and into the first corner I go up the inside of Lewis Hamilton. We narrowly avoid Fernando Alonso and then well, I overtook everyone else. For 70% AI, second place managed to reduce the gap to 1.5 seconds, which was half of 60% AI. And considering I usually play at 80% AI, I was definitely starting to get a little bit worried. Now we were at the difficulty that I usually play at, 30% off 110% AI, and I got a pretty awful start. I got loads of wheel spin off the line, however thankfully I didn't lose any places to Sergio Perez or Fernando Alonso. So on the run up to turn 3, I'm just behind Carlos Sainz. He takes probably the tightest angle I've ever seen into a corner, so I go the long way round around the outside and we make a pretty easy overtake. We are now on the final couple of corners of the final laps. Coming into the final corner, I almost lose the car, and honestly that probably was quite lucky as Sergio Perez might have been side by side with me coming into the final corner. However, we do hold him off and eventually finish 0.205 seconds ahead of him. The AI had once again gained time on me. From now on, I'd be racing against difficulties that I don't usually race against, and it solely meant that however I was driving in those specific races would determine whether or not I could actually beat them. We were now against 90% AI, and I didn't have the best reaction time off the start, however I got much better traction. I got past Lewis Hamilton on the run up to turn 1, and now I was just behind Charles Leclerc in first place. However, I only ended up chasing Charles for 2 laps. Coming onto the main straight here, we've got much more overspeed with the DRS. He starts defending fresh air, so I push him a little bit further wide, and as we come into the corner, he's got once again a really tight angle, an easy overtake. To be honest, 90% AI wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. That was until the final corner, where I got a really poor exit and Charles Leclerc almost got me at the line. He finished under a tenth of a second within me, and coming into the final 2 races I definitely wasn't feeling too confident. I was now on the penultimate race against 100% AI, and for once I actually got a pretty decent start. I managed to jump both Stroll and Alonso coming into the first corner, and now I was stuck behind George Russell. So as we move on to lap 3, DRS has just been enabled and I'm tucked in the slipstream of George Russell. For what seems like the first time in 3 or 4 races, the AI don't actually take the inside line and take a tighter angle into the corner. That was my job this time, and I broke later into the corner and we got past George Russell. However, there was nothing I could do to stop George Russell getting past me on lap 4, but I'd seen enough Jarno Opmeer videos to know that being behind at Austria with DRS on the final lap isn't necessarily a bad thing. And for once on the F1 game, I actually made the right decision. Coming up to turn 3, I had so much more overspeed than George Russell, but he did actually brake a bit later than me. That didn't matter, however, as I got much better traction out of the corner and we were clear of him coming onto the next straight. So yeah, 100% AI was definitely the hardest race that I've had so far. We actually ended up beating them after a few failed attempts by over 1 second because I think they were fighting into the final corner. In the end, day 2 was difficult, but I felt like I was learning every race that I did. Next up will be 110% AI, and I'd need every bit of luck that I could get. So for day 3 I had 1 goal and 1 goal only, which was to beat 110% AI, and then honestly I just wanted to go and watch the US Grand Prix qualifying. I'll be honest with you, I was definitely a little bit nervous for this race as I didn't know if I could actually beat 110% AI, and considering I recorded this the day before it came out, I had no idea if I'd actually be able to get the video out in time. Of course, I made sure that I was starting at the front for this race as I would be needing every advantage that I could get. Lining up next to me was Fernando Alonso, and off the line I got a little bit of wheel spin, however I got a much better start than him. I think he dropped back 2 or 3 places, and into turn 1 I had no competition. This was a perfect scenario. So at this point everything was going very well. I had a big gap to George Russell behind me and I was delighted. I didn't think I'd have to use any of my battery, however as I looked behind here I got shook and he was coming so fast at me. We come into the 3rd corner here and I try and brake a little bit deeper to get a good exit. That kind of works and eventually I do outdrag him off the corner. Now I'd actually recognise that the speed the AI had around the track everywhere was literally a massive difference. As we come into turn 4 here, I close the door on George, however he still makes a big dive bomb. Once again I'm going round the outside and we manage to outdrag him out of the corner, but I take a really wide line and I kind of allow him back into it, but coming into the next corner I cover him off and we're all good. Overall, I'd say this was probably the best sort of start I could have hoped for. I was a little bit ahead of second, but the main point was that I was still in first and could defend my lead, because once I let the AI get ahead of me, there was no way that I'd be able to hold them back. Luckily for me, I had no problems on lap 2 as Norris and Russell were fighting. However, it didn't take very long for Norris to come back at me, and as we're coming onto lap 3 here, DRS is being enabled. For some reason, I tried to brake early and give myself DRS against George Russell, but I'm an idiot and I actually broke too late. This meant Russell got past me with ease, and as we're coming up to turn 3, I noticed that Russell is getting away and I cannot afford to lose him. And well, I'm just going to let this play out. Yeah, I basically kamikazed him out of the way. As we're coming to the end of lap 3, I've once again got a driver all over me, and this time it's Lando Norris. Coming into the penultimate corner, he sends it up my inside, I run wide, I kind of just let him through, but then we're coming out of the exit of the final corner and I actually run really wide. Thankfully we've got DRS, but we are running quickly out of VRS, and if I don't get past him in the DRS zones, I won't get ahead of him. But as we're coming into the first corner, he misses the apex by an absolute mile, and it allows us to shoot through up the inside, and now this has given us a bit of a buffer to second place. And as we're coming into the final couple of laps, I've got a little bit of a gap that I desperately needed. And as we're finishing up the first sector here, I was definitely starting to think that the challenge might actually be possible. However, I couldn't afford to become complacent, as on the final lap Carlos Sainz sent it up my inside, but I used the trusted method of going around the outside and using the momentum. Once again it worked and I managed to outdrag him, but unfortunately this time I didn't have DRS. This would be a massive problem as I had no ERS left either. He kind of hesitated as to which way to go here, so I managed to stay in the middle and just keep the door shut. He did, in fairness, try it around the outside, but I wasn't having any of it. I did not want to lose this challenge. As we're coming up to the fast left-handers here, I kind of ran on the grass and that threw me off a little. I accidentally left the door open, but I managed to just about keep it shut. Coming into the final sector, we had 5 cars within 1 second, but then I made a huge mistake which really compromised my exit. We're coming into the last 2 corners here and it was about to be 3 wide. And I told myself there was no way I was backing out. I basically bashed them out of the way, but let's ignore that. As we round the final corner, I'd actually managed to beat 110% AI and therefore I completed the challenge. I was buzzing as this definitely didn't take at least 10 attempts of me just losing and coming last. Thank you all for watching and I hope you enjoy my new consistent upload schedule. I'm trying to upload every Saturday. Enjoy the Grand Prix and please put in the comments a video that you'd like to see next week.